The rain had been falling for hours, turning the busy streets of San Francisco into a blur of gray and silver. Cars rushed past, splashing water onto sidewalks, while pedestrians hurried with their heads down, clutching umbrellas tightly against the wind. Somewhere in the middle of that chaos, Sundar Pichai walked quietly, unnoticed by most. He had no security guards with him today, no flashing cameras, no assistant holding a tablet full of schedules. It was one of those rare mornings when he chose to move without the weight of his title, blending in with the crowd. His mind was heavy, not with work, but with something more personal. The previous night, he had read a letter from an old friend who had served in the army. It was a heartbreaking message, stories of veterans returning home only to face homelessness, loneliness, and rejection from the same society they had once risked their lives to protect. Sundar had been restless all night, unable to shake the images from his mind. He didn't have a clear destination when he left his apartment. His feet seemed to choose their own path, leading him through narrow streets and under bridges, where the city's glow faded into shadows. There, huddled against a wall under a worn blanket, he saw him. The man's face was rugged, weathered by years of sun, rain, and sorrow. His hair was tangled, streaked with white, and his beard looked like it hadn't been trimmed in years. Beside him sat a small cardboard sign, the letters barely visible through the water stains. Army veteran. Need help. His hands trembled slightly as he held a paper cup, half filled with loose change. Sundar slowed his steps. Most people walked past without even glancing. A few looked, but quickly turned away as if the sight of him was too much to carry. Sundar didn't walk past. Instead, he stopped, his shoes inches away from the puddle by the man's feet. "Good morning," Sundar said softly. The man looked up, his eyes cloudy yet sharp, like someone who had seen too much and trusted. "Too little. Don't waste your time, sir," he muttered. "I know you're not here for me." "Nobody is." Something in those words pierced Sundar's chest. "I'm here because I want to be," he replied. "What's your name?" The man hesitated, then said, "Daniel. But most people just call me Hey You or Move Along." Rain dripped from the edge of the man's blanket. Sundar could see the way his shoulders curled inward, like he was trying to disappear. "Daniel," Sundar repeated. "How long have you been out here?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "Too long to count?" "Not that anyone's counting. I served my country for 15 years. Now I'm serving a life sentence on the streets." There was silence for a moment, only the sound of rain hitting concrete. Sundar felt the weight of those words. 15 years of service, and this was what he got in return. "You said you served. Where?" Sundar asked gently. "Afghanistan. Iraq. A few places I'm not allowed to talk about. I've seen things, sir, things you wouldn't believe. And when it was all over, they gave me a medal, a handshake, and a bus ticket home. No job, no support, nothing." Sundar knelt down so he was eye level with him. "Did you try reaching out to veteran services?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Do you know how many forms you have to fill out just to get a call back? And even if they do, it takes months." "I needed help then, not half a year later. So I stopped asking." A gust of wind blew through, chilling them both. Sundar could feel the cold biting at his own skin. But Daniel sat there as if the cold was an old friend, one he'd grown used to. "When's the last time you had a hot meal?" Sundar asked. Daniel single quotes. eyes shifted, almost embarrassed. 3 days ago. Some church volunteers came by with soup. But it wasn't enough for everyone. I gave mine to a woman who had her kid with her." Sundar was silent for a long moment. There was a quiet strength in Daniel, even in his brokenness. Then Sundar reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He took out a few bills and held them out. "Here, get yourself something to eat." Daniel didn't move. "You don't get it, sir. It's not about the money. You can give me $100 and it won't change anything. Tomorrow I'll be here again, in the same place, with the same sign. Then maybe," Sundar said, "we need to change more than just today." Daniel looked at him, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before Sundar could answer, a loud voice came from behind them. Hey, leave him alone. Both men turned. A police officer was walking quickly toward them, his expression sharp. Officer, Sundar began, but the officer cut him off. This guy's not supposed to be here. We've had complaints. He's been loitering. Loitering? Sundar asked, his voice calm but firm. He's sitting here trying to survive. Sir, please step back. The officer ordered. Daniel, single quotes, shoulders slumped. It's fine, he muttered. I'll move along. Happens all the time, but Sundar didn't move. No, it's not fine. You can't just erase someone because they make you uncomfortable. The officer's eyes narrowed. Who exactly do you think you are? Sundar opened his mouth to answer, but stopped. For a moment, he considered revealing who he was, but something inside told him this wasn't the time. Instead, he said, someone who's not going to walk away. The officer stepped closer, his tone growing harsher. Last warning, sir. Move along, or there'll be consequences. Daniel's eyes flickered with fear. Please, he whispered to Sundar. Don't make this worse for yourself. But Sundar stood his ground. Some things are worth standing for. The rain seemed to fall harder, the street growing quieter around them as tension filled the air. The officer reached for his radio, his gaze locked on Sundar. Then, suddenly, the officer froze mid-step. His eyes widened slightly, as if he had just recognized something. Wait a minute, the officer said slowly. You're not. Before he could finish, a black SUV pulled up beside the sidewalk, its tinted windows rolling down just enough for someone inside to speak. Mr. Pichai, we need to go. No. Daniel's eyes darted from Sundar to the SUV, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. You're him? Daniel whispered. And in that instant, the officer's entire demeanor changed. Asterisk, the sound of the rain seemed to fade for a moment, as if the entire street was holding its breath. The officer's eyes narrowed, his posture stiffening as the realization settled in. It was as if the pieces of a puzzle had suddenly clicked into place, the calm defiance, the composed tone, and now the black SUV that had pulled up like a shadow with its tinted windows. Double quotes, Mr. Pichai. The officer repeated, his voice softer. Now, though still wrapped in uncertainty, Sundar did not answer right away. His gaze stayed on Daniel, whose eyes were wide, the weight of the moment hanging heavy between them. Daniel's hands trembled, but not from the cold this time. It was a different kind of shock, the kind that strips away years of hardened survival and leaves a person momentarily vulnerable. The man inside the SUV leaned forward again. His voice urgent. Sir, you really need to come with us. Your schedule. Forget the schedule, Sundar interrupted, still kneeling beside Daniel. There was no sharpness in his tone, but there was something immovable about it, like a quiet. Well, no one dared push against. This matters more. The officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the SUV, then at Sundar, then at Daniel. His stance softened, but there was still a trace of defensiveness in his voice. Look, I'm just doing my job. We've had calls about disturbances, complaints from nearby shops. If I don't act on them, it comes back on me. Sundar's expression was steady. And what happens to him when you act on them? Where did he go? The officer hesitated. His eyes dropped for a brief second, as if he didn't have an answer he could defend. Daniel let out a quiet laugh, the kind that carries no joy. He knows where I go, he said. Around the corner, under another roof, until someone else decides I'm in the way again. It's a game of musical chairs, only the music never stops. I just keep moving until one day. I won't. The words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Sundar looked at him, really looked at him, not as a man who had been pushed to society's edges, but as someone who still carried the weight of battles most people would never see. Daniel, Sundar said slowly, if you could change one thing right now, just one thing, what would it be? Daniel hesitated. For a moment, his eyes flickered with something like hope, but it was quickly swallowed by the years of disappointment. I'd want a place where I'm not temporary, not just a body taking up space. Somewhere I could wake up and know no one's going to tell me to move along. The words were simple, but they struck Sundar like a stone to the chest. In his world of billion-dollar projects and global strategies, everything was temporary, unless you built it to last. And here was a man whose entire existence was built on temporary shelter, temporary meals, temporary kindness dot behind them. The SUV's driver cleared his throat, but Sundar ignored it. Instead, he stood and turned to the officer. He's not going anywhere today. Not unless it's somewhere warm and safe. The officer studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a short nod. Fine. Mark. It handled, but this is on you. It's always been on all of us, Sundar replied quietly. As the officer walked away, Daniel shook his head in disbelief. He didn't have to do that. He could have made trouble for you. Daniel, Sundar said, his voice calm but carrying a certain weight. Trouble is ignoring someone who's fought for you and then pretending it's not your problem. Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he pulled his blanket tighter around himself, as if trying to make sense of what was happening. Sundar crouched down again. Come with me, he said. Daniel blinked. What? Come with me, Sundar repeated. Just for a meal. And a conversation. There was hesitation in Daniel's eyes, the kind born from too many broken promises. Why? He asked. Because I think you have a story the world needs to hear, Sundar said. And maybe, just maybe, it starts with you not being out here tonight. Daniel studied him, searching for the catch. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. People hear veteran and think hero, but there are parts of me, parts you wouldn't like. Everyone has parts they're not proud of, Sundar said. But they're still part of the story, and stories can change. The rain had slowed now, the streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Daniel glanced at his cup of coins, then back at Sundar. If I say yes, Daniel said carefully, do I get to come back here tomorrow if I want? If you say yes, Sundar replied, we'll make sure you never have to come back here unless you choose to. Daniel let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing just a little. All right, he said finally, one meal. But after that, no promises. That's all I'm asking, Sundar said with a faint smile. He helped Daniel to his feet. The older man's knees stiff from sitting on cold concrete for hours. They began walking toward the SUV, and Daniel kept glancing sideways at him, as if still trying to decide if this was real. When they reached the car, the driver stepped out and opened the back door. Daniel hesitated at the sight of the luxury. Interior, his eyes narrowing slightly. This ain't my kind of place, he muttered. It's just a ride, Sundar reassured him. Nothing more. Daniel climbed in slowly, his fingers brushing against the soft leather seats. It was the kind of comfort he hadn't felt in years, and it made him uneasy. As the SUV pulled away. Daniel looked out the window at the streets he knew so well, the alleys, the bus stops, the sheltered doorways. Then he turned to Sundar. Where exactly are we going? To a place where we can talk, Sundar said. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Talk about what? About the truth, Sundar replied. Daniel frowned. The truth about what? Sundar's gaze didn't waver. About why you're really here, and what happened the night you came home from the war. Daniel's breath caught. His hand tightened around the edge of the seat. How do you know about that night? He asked slowly, his voice trembling. Sundar didn't answer. The silence in the car grew heavy. The city lights flickering past like fragments of a memory Daniel had tried to bury for years. Asterisk, the hum of the SUV's engine was the only sound between them. A low vibration that seemed to echo the tension in the air. Daniel sat stiffly, his eyes fixed on the dark streets beyond the window. But Sundar could see the way his jaw tightened every time the car turned, as if each movement was carrying him closer to a place he had promised himself never to return. To a place inside his mind, not on any map. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low, as if afraid the walls of the car might hold on to his words. You said, the night I came home from the war. He paused, swallowing hard. How could you possibly know about that? Sundar's gaze stayed steady. Someone told me. Someone who said that night changed everything for you. And it's the reason you've been out here, avoiding the world ever since. Daniel turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. Who told you? Nobody knows the whole story. Not even the other guys from my unit. I've made sure of that. Maybe not the whole story, Sundar admitted, but enough to know it broke something in you. And I think you've been carrying the weight alone for too long. Daniel looked away again, the streetlights painting his face in fleeting flashes of gold and shadow. His hands, scarred and rough, fidgeted against the seam of his worn jacket. There's a reason I don't talk about it, he muttered. Once you start telling it, you're right back there. Hearing the sounds, smelling the smoke, feeling the... He trailed off, his voice cracking just slightly before he caught himself. Sundar didn't push. Instead, he let the silence sit between them for a moment, giving Daniel space to decide whether he wanted to step into it. The SUV turned down a quieter street, where tall buildings gave way to a small row of old brick storefronts. One of them, a dimly lit diner with fogged-up windows, caught Daniel's attention. Here, he asked, surprised. Here, Sundar confirmed. No reservations, no cameras. Just a table, some food, and time to talk. The driver pulled over, and they stepped out into the cool night air. Daniel's boots splashed in a shallow puddle as they crossed to the diner door. Inside, the warmth hit them immediately, along with the smell of fresh coffee and frying onions. There were only a few customers, a couple in the corner sharing pie, a man reading a newspaper at the counter. They slid into a booth near the back. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes but a kind smile, handed them menus. Daniel stared at his for a long time, his hands lingering over the laminated paper. Don't think I've had this many choices in years, he murmured. Order whatever you want, Sundar said. And get dessert too. Daniel's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile but came close. Careful. I might take you up on that. After they ordered burgers, fries, and coffee for both, Sundar leaned forward, his voice low. Daniel, the reason I wanted to meet you wasn't just because of what I saw today. I have been thinking about the way our society treats people who've given everything. It's not just wrong, it's inhuman. But I can't help if I don't understand the full story. Daniel stared into his coffee cup. Full story, huh? People don't usually want that. They want the shiny version. The flag-waving, medal-winning, saluting on TV version. They don't want to hear about the parts that don't fit the movie script. I want the truth, Sundar said quietly. Daniel took a long sip of coffee, his eyes far away. I came home from my last deployment in 2014. My body made it back, but my head stayed over there. My unit, we lost 3 guys in one night. The kind of night where the air is so full of dust and blood, you can't tell which is which. His voice faltered, and his fingers gripped the mug tighter. When the plane landed here, there were flags, music, speeches. My mom was there, crying, hugging me. I told her I was fine. I wasn't fine. He took another sip, as if the heat could keep the memories from freezing him. 2 weeks later, I was back in my old neighborhood. Only it didn't feel like my neighborhood anymore. Everything was louder, smaller, more dangerous, somehow. He looked up at Sundar, his eyes haunted. And then came that night. I was walking home late. A guy came out of nowhere, drunk, yelling, shoving. I reacted before I even thought. My training, it just took over. When I came back to myself, he was on the ground, not moving. Sundar's breath caught, but he stayed silent, letting Daniel continue. Turns out he wasn't armed. Wasn't even really trying to hurt me, just a stupid drunk. But it was too late. The cops came, and they saw me, a soldier, fresh from combat, and suddenly I was dangerous, unstable. They didn't care that I'd been on edge every day since I came back. They didn't care that I didn't mean for it to happen. All they saw was a problem to get rid of. Daniel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I didn't go to prison, but the charges, they ruined everything. No one would hire me. Even the army turned its back on me. I lost my apartment, my friends. Eventually, I stopped trying. And here I am. The waitress returned with their food, setting down steaming plates and refilling their coffee. Daniel didn't touch his burger right away. He just stared at it, lost in thought. Sundar spoke softly. Daniel, what happened that night? It doesn't erase the years you served. It doesn't erase the good you've done. And it doesn't mean your life is over. Daniel gave a dry laugh. Easy for you to say. You've got a driver waiting outside. I've got a blanket that smells like the sidewalk. Maybe that blanket doesn't have to be your life anymore, Sundar said. Daniel looked at him with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. And what, you're just gonna fix it? Like waving a magic wand? No, Sundar replied. But I can open a door. The rest will be up to you. Daniel studied him for a long moment, then picked up his burger and took a slow bite, chewing in silence. When he finally spoke again, his tone had shifted, softer, but still guarded. If I told you, yes, what would be the first step? Sundar didn't hesitate. A roof over your head. Tonight. Daniel set down his burger. Tonight? Tonight? Sundar confirmed. And tomorrow we talk about what comes after. Daniel shook his head slowly, as if trying to convince himself this wasn't some dream that would disappear in the morning. You don't even know if I'm worth it. Everyone's worth it, Sundar said. Daniel's single quotes, eyes flickered with something almost like belief. But before he could answer, the diner door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air. 2 men in dark coats walked in, scanning the room quickly. Before their eyes locked on Daniel, they started toward the booth with deliberate steps. Daniel's face went pale. Oh no, he whispered. Who are they? Sundar asked. They're not here for coffee, Daniel said, his voice shaking. They're here for me. The 2 men moved with a precision that made the hairs on the back of Daniel's neck stand up. Their coats were heavy, their steps unhurried but purposeful, like they knew exactly where they were going and didn't expect anyone to stop them. Daniel's breathing quickened, and his eyes darted toward the diner's back exit. He looked like a man who had seen this kind of approach before, in alleyways, in foreign streets, in the blurred seconds before everything went wrong. Sundar noticed the subtle change in Daniel's posture. His back stiffened, shoulders tensed, and his hands slid off the table, resting near his lap as if ready to move at any second. It was the kind of readiness born from years of military instinct. Fight, flee, or freeze. But the fight in. Daniel's eyes was dulled by exhaustion. Daniel, Sundar said quietly, do you know them? Daniel's lips pressed into a tight line. Yeah, he whispered, though his voice trembled. Too well. The taller of the 2 men reached their booth first, his expression unreadable. He was clean-shaven, but his skin was weathered, his eyes sharp in a way that spoke of both discipline and danger. The second man, broader and slightly older, had a scar running from his left temple to his jaw. Both men stood over the table without speaking, their presence alone demanding attention. You're hard to find, the taller one said finally, his tone calm but carrying an undertone that made Daniel shift uncomfortably. Wasn't hiding. Daniel replied, though the flicker of unease in his eyes told Sundar otherwise. We need to talk. The scarred man added, his voice low and gravelly. Privately. Sundar's gaze moved between them, reading their body language. They weren't random troublemakers. There was too much calculation in their movements, too much familiarity in the way they addressed Daniel. Anything you need to say, you can say here, Sundar said evenly. The taller man's eyes narrowed, landing on Sundar for the first time, as if realizing he wasn't just a bystander. And you are a friend, Sundar replied without hesitation. The scarred man gave a faint smirk. Some friend, buying him burgers in a place like this. But trust me, you don't know the half of it. Daniel's jaw tightened. Don't start, he warned. We have to, Daniel, the taller man said, his tone softening just slightly. It's been years, and now things have changed. They're asking questions again. The words seemed to land like a weight in the air. Daniel's hand twitched against his thigh. I told you, I'm done. Whatever happened, it's in the past. The past has a way of catching up, the scarred man said, his gaze steady. Especially when there are people out there who still think you know something you're not telling. Sundar leaned forward slightly. What is this about? Daniel's eyes flashed with frustration. Nothing that matters anymore. It matters to them. The taller man cut in. And it matters to the people who were there that night. He walked away, Daniel. He disappeared. But not everyone got that chance. A silence stretched over the table, thick and suffocating. Sundar could see the battle behind Daniel's eyes, the part of him that wanted to run, and the part of him that knew running wouldn't make it go away. Look, Daniel said finally, his voice low. I'm not going back. Not to that life. Not to those memories. I've paid enough. Paid? The scarred man asked. This isn't about punishment. It's about survival. Yours and maybe ours. Sundar caught that. Maybe ours. This wasn't just a personal confrontation. Something bigger was at play. The taller man glanced around the diner, then leaned. And closer. Someone's been asking around about you. About your unit. They're digging, Daniel. And if they find you like this on the streets, you won't stand a chance. Daniel's hands curled into fists, his knuckles pale. Then, maybe they should just get it over with. Don't say that. The scarred man shot back, his voice sharp. You think we came all this way to watch you give up? The waitress, sensing the tension, hovered at a distance but didn't approach. The other diners had started glancing over, sensing something unusual was unfolding. Sundar placed a steady hand on the table, his voice calm but unyielding. If you have something to say, say it. If you need something from him, tell him. Otherwise, leave. The taller man's gaze shifted to Sundar again, studying him with more attention now. You care about him. Why? Because no one else seemed to. Sundar answered. The scarred man exchanged a glance with his partner. You should know, Mr. Friend, that caring about Daniel comes with risks, not the kind you can buy your way out of. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. See? This is why I left. Every conversation turns into a warning. This isn't. Just a warning? The taller man said, his voice dropping to a whisper. They're already here, in the city. And they're not looking for forgiveness. They're looking for the truth. And if they think you're still holding it, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. The tension in his tone said enough. Daniel pushed back from the booth abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. I'm done talking. The two men didn't stop him. They stepped aside, letting him pass, but their eyes followed him until he reached the diner door. Sundar hesitated, then stood to follow, but before he could, the scarred man placed a hand on the table, leaning down slightly. You seem like someone with influence, he said quietly. If you want to help him, keep him close. But don't get too close. You don't know what's buried under his past. And with that, they left, slipping into the night as quickly as they had appeared. Outside, Sundar found Daniel, standing. Under the awning, rain dripping from the edge above them. His shoulders were hunched, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. Daniel, Sundar said softly, what just happened? Daniel didn't look at him. Nothing you need to get mixed up in. It seems like I already am, Sundar replied. Daniel let out a long, unsteady breath. You don't understand. These men, they weren't my enemies. They were my brothers once. And if they've come all this way to find me, it means something's about to break open. Something I've been trying to keep buried for over a decade. He turned to face Sundar, his eyes dark and resolute. And if it does, you'll wish you'd never met me. Asterisk, the rain had shifted from a drizzle to a steady downpour, each drop pattering against the pavement in a rhythm that seemed to match the heavy beat of Sundar's thoughts. The streets around them were quiet now, the glow from the diner's neon sign casting faint red and blue reflections on the wet ground. Daniel stood there, his face half shadowed under the awning, but Sundar could see the tremor in his jaw. A moment, neither man spoke. Sundar could feel the weight of Daniel's last words still lingering in the air. You'll wish you'd never met me. They weren't spoken as a threat, but as a warning born from someone who had already lost too much and didn't want anyone else to be caught in the same undertow. Daniel, Sundar began slowly, his voice steady. Wishing I never met you isn't going to happen. Whatever this is, you've been carrying it alone for too long, but you can't outrun it forever. Daniel gave a short, humorless laugh. Outrun it? I haven't outrun anything. I just let it swallow me whole. It's easier than fighting ghosts. What are you so afraid will happen if you face it? Sundar asked, searching his expression. Daniel, single quotes, S eyes flickered toward the rain-slicked street, scanning as if he expected to see those two men again. It's not about what happens to me, he said quietly. It's about who else gets pulled under with me. Before Sundar could reply, a low rumble of thunder rolled over the city, and Daniel stepped out from under the awning, letting the rain soak into his jacket. Come on, he muttered. If I'm going to tell you this, we can't do it here. They walked in silence, the city around them feeling strangely empty despite the occasional passing car. Daniel led them down a side street and into a small, public park, the kind with rusted benches and street lamps that flickered as if they were tired of working. They stopped beneath the canopy of a large, gnarled tree. The rain still fell, but the branches caught most of it, giving them a thin shelter. Daniel leaned against the trunk, his eyes distant. Back in 2012, he began, our unit was sent on a mission we were never supposed to talk about. It wasn't even officially acknowledged. We were told it was to protect a convoy, standard stuff, but halfway through, things changed. We were ordered to secure something, not someone, something. He paused, his fingers curling as if gripping an invisible rifle. When we found it, it wasn't weapons. It wasn't drugs. It was information. Hard drives, documents, things that didn't belong in a war zone. Things that, if they got out, could ruin people, powerful people. Sundar's brow furrowed. So you brought them back? Daniel shook his head slowly. That was the plan. But before we could, we were ambushed. Not by the enemy, we were told to expect, by a group that moved like professionals, spoke English like it was their first language. They knew exactly what we had. Rain dripped from the tree branches above, splashing onto Daniel's shoulders. But he didn't seem to notice. Half my team didn't make it out. The other half, they made deals, gave up what we had in exchange for walking away alive. But there was one copy they didn't know about, and it ended up with me. And you still have it, Sundar. Guess quietly. Daniel looked at him sharply. No, I got rid of it years ago. Or at least, I thought I did. But if those two men tonight are right, then someone thinks I still have it. Or knows where it is. Sundar absorbed this in silence. The threads were starting to weave together. The men in the diner, the warnings, the years of hiding. This wasn't just about a veteran who had fallen through the cracks. This was about a man holding a piece of something much larger than self. Daniel, Sundar said carefully, if this is true, then the people looking for you won't stop. They'll push until you have nothing left. Unless, he trailed off, his mind working through the possibilities. Unless you bring it into the open. Sunlight is the only thing that kills this kind of shadow. Daniel shook his head sharply. You think going public will save me? It'll get me buried. Maybe not in a grave, but in a cell no one talks about. And anyone connected to me, you included, will be on their list. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. Both men froze. It was too deliberate to be random, too steady to be someone just passing through the park. Daniel, single quotes. Eyes darted toward a dim path to their right. We're not alone, he said under his breath. Sundar turned his head slightly, catching the shape of two figures moving slowly between the lampposts. The rain made them blurry, but there was no mistaking the fact they were coming closer. Daniel's voice was low but urgent. If they catch us here, there won't be time to talk. We need to move. Without waiting for an answer, he started toward the far side of the park, his pace quickening. Sundar followed, his shoes splashing through shallow puddles. The sound of the footsteps behind them grew louder, matching their pace. They cut through a narrow passage between two buildings, emerging onto a quieter street lined with shuttered shops. Daniel glanced back, his breath sharp in the cold air. We can't go to my usual spots. If they found me here, they know them all. Then we go somewhere they won't expect, Sundar said. Like where? Like somewhere they can't follow. Sundar replied. Daniel slowed just enough to glance at him. And you've got a place like that? Yes, Sundar said. But we have to get there first. The footsteps behind them had turned into a jog now, splashes of water echoing off the walls. Daniel's face hardened. Then we run. And they did. The rain blurred the edges of the world around them as they darted through back streets, the glow of streetlights flashing past in quick bursts. The sound of pursuit didn't fade. If anything, it grew sharper, like whoever was chasing them knew these streets just as well as Daniel once did. Finally, they rounded a corner and Sundar slowed in front of an unmarked steel door tucked between two graffiti-covered walls. He punched a code into a small keypad and the lock clicked open. Inside, Sundar said. Daniel hesitated only for a second before stepping in. Sundar followed, closing the door behind them. The sound of the lock engaging was heavy and final, shutting out the rain, and, for the moment, whoever had been on their heels. The room they entered was dim, lined with shelves of books and a single desk pushed against the far wall. It looked nothing like an office and everything like a safe house. Daniel looked around slowly. This isn't what I expected. Good, Sundar said. That's why it works. Daniel turned to him, his expression caught between suspicion and reluctant trust. So now what? We just sit here and wait for them to knock down the door? No, Sundar said quietly. Now you tell me everything you've been holding back. Because if we're going to survive what's coming, I need the truth, all of it. Daniel stared at him for a long moment, the weight of years of silence pressing in from all sides. Then he sank into the chair by the desk, his shoulders slumping. All right, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. But once you hear it, there's no going back. And as he began to speak, the sound of a faint knock echoed. Against the steel door. Asterisk. The knock against the steel door was not loud. But in the stillness of that hidden room, it sounded like a gunshot. Both men froze. Daniel's eyes darted to Sundar, and Sundar's gaze went instinctively to the shadows near the ceiling, where the dim light didn't reach. Another knock. Slower this time. Deliberate. They found us, Daniel whispered, his voice tight, almost resigned. Sundar raised a hand, signaling for silence. He stepped quietly to the side wall and pressed his palm against a small, concealed panel. A faint hum filled the air as a hidden camera feed flickered to life on a narrow screen embedded in the wall. The image was grainy, blurred slightly by raindrops on the lens, but they could make out a figure standing outside the steel door, alone. The figure's hood was pulled low, the face hidden in shadow, and the hands remained in the pockets of a dark coat, not one of the two from the diner, Sundar murmured, his eyes narrowing. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. His breath caught. No, but I know that stance. I know that person. Who? Sundar asked. Daniel hesitated, as though saying the name might open a door he had spent years trying to keep shut. Her name's Riley? She was in my unit. One of the best we had? I thought she was dead. Another knock came. This one, softer, almost hesitant. Daniel moved toward the door, but Sundar stepped in front of him. If she's alive and she's here, she's not here by accident. Would you let me open it? Daniel gave a reluctant nod. Sundar unlatched the inner mechanism, the heavy steel groaning softly as the door swung inward. Riley stepped inside quickly, her eyes scanning the room before they landed on Daniel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavier than the rain still falling outside. You're really alive, Daniel said at last, his voice carrying both disbelief and something dangerously close to hope. Riley's expression tightened, barely. And I won't be for long if we stay here. What's going on? Sundar asked, stepping closer. Riley's gaze flicked to him, studying him with the precision of someone trained to size up strangers in seconds. "You're not military," she said flatly. "No," Sundar replied. "But I'm here to help him." Riley gave a short, humorless laugh. "Then you're in deeper than you realize." She turned back to Daniel. "They're moving fast, whatever you had back then. They think you still have it. They've been tracking me since I got out. They'll be here soon." Daniel rubbed, his temples, frustration seeping into his voice. "I told you I destroyed it." "And I told you," Riley shot back, "nothing ever really gets destroyed. Not if it's worth something. And this is worth everything." "The kind of everything people kill for?" Sundar spoke carefully. "Then maybe we stop running. Maybe we put it in the light where they can't bury it anymore." Riley's eyes snapped to him, sharp and cold. "That's noble." "It's also suicide." The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. Daniel sank into the chair again, his fingers gripping the edge as if to anchor himself. "So, what do we do?" Riley crouched down beside him, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We find it before they do. And then we decide if the truth is worth our lives." The idea seemed to hang in the air, impossible yet inescapable. Sundar broke the silence. "Where is it?" Daniel's eyes met his, and for the first time that night, there was no hesitation. "An old storage unit? Outside the city. Under another name? I haven't been there in years." Riley stood. "Then that's where we go." "Tonight?" They moved quickly, gathering what little they needed. Sundar led them out through a back exit that opened into a narrow alley, the rain still falling steadily. The city felt different now, every shadow deeper, every passing car a potential threat. They reached the SUV without incident, and soon the city lights faded behind them, replaced by the empty stretches of road leading toward the industrial outskirts. No one spoke much during the drive. Daniel kept glancing in the mirrors, and Riley's hand never strayed far from the small pack at her side. Finally, they pulled into a gravel lot beside a row of storage units, each one identical to the next. The air was thick with the smell of wet asphalt and rust. Daniel led them to a unit near the far end and knelt to unlock the heavy padlock. The door creaked open, revealing stacks of old boxes, a few pieces of broken furniture, and, in the far corner, a metal case about the size of a briefcase. Daniel stared at it for a long moment before stepping forward. "This is it." He pulled it out, setting it on the ground. The latches clicked open, and the lid lifted with a slow, reluctant groan. Inside were several small drives, each labeled with strings of letters and numbers, meaningless to most. But to them, a silent confirmation of everything. Riley's breath caught. "I thought it was gone." "So did I," Daniel said quietly. Sundar looked from the drives to their faces. "So now we decide, do we burn it or do we use it?" Before either could answer, headlights flared across the lot, sweeping over them in a sudden, blinding flash. The roar of engines followed, and the sound of multiple doors slamming shut echoed through the night. Riley's voice was sharp. "They're here." Daniel's grip tightened on the metal case. He looked at Sundar, his eyes steady now, the years of wear replaced by a clarity Sundar hadn't seen before. "If we run," Daniel said, "this never ends. If we stand, we might not walk away. But at least we finish it." The gravel crunched under approaching boots. Shadows moved at the edges of the headlights, closing in. Sundar stepped forward, his voice calm but certain. "Then we stand." The first figure emerged from the light, and the night held its breath. Everything that had been hidden for years was about to come crashing into the open, and there would be no going back. Asterisk, asterisk.